Hey guys, all right, today we're gonna talk about how to roast beets without foil. Well, we got a few things to cover first. We're gonna talk about the nutrition of beets, why you wanna avoid foil, and the best way to roast beets, and other root vegetables for that matter. So starting with nutrition, I just actually went out and picked my beets, and these guys are full of goodness. They are high in the bioactives or phytonutrients that you can find in beets are things like betanin and betaine and polyphenols and phenolics. And then in addition to that, the nutrition that we know, like on the side panel, are things like folate and fiber and iron and manganese and vitamin C and vitamin E. So a lot of antioxidant activity in there as well. And did I mention good fiber too? Did I say fiber? They're good in fiber as well, but they're also delicious. So you can use beets. A lot of people will, like, when you talk about beets and you think about nutrition, they think first nitrates. Like that's one thing that people always equate with beets. So beets are high in nitrates, which can convert to nitric oxide. And what that does to the body is it dilates the blood vessel. So a lot of times athletes will use beets or beet powder for that matter, more of a supplement form typically. Because they want to dilate the blood vessel to help with athletic performance and oxygen movement for during and post recovery. It's helpful for both of those things. But beets have a lot going for them. And they're delicious. So don't sidestep them and just use the supplement. I mean, you really want to eat the food because it is like one of my all-time favorite foods. And this is like a really polarizing food. I know some people like absolutely love them, but I almost exclusively roast my beets. I rarely do other preps for them, like boiling, but I know some people love that as well. And then there's a lot of things you can do with them because they're pretty, they just like mesh with everything. They're like this earthy, dense, I don't even know how to describe it, sweet, kind of, it's just so good. But anyway, so we're gonna start by removing the tops, and I usually just use my knife, but we're gonna remove the tops here. And I never discard these unless they're like these brown ones we're gonna pull off. But beet greens are actually really tasty too. So we're going to wash these, and I use them in salads, I use them in smoothies, I use them in a lot of different things. So I'm gonna reserve those for later use. But my beets are like larger than a golf ball size. So I'm going to cut these in half, or what would be like 4 bites for somebody. One of the big things, so now getting into how you want to roast the beets, is most definitely you want to make sure that you have uniform cuts of food always when you're cooking. Like that's step number 1, because then you know that everything is going to be cooked at the same time. So I'm going to get to cutting these into uniform sized pieces. And all I'm doing, I'm not going to remove the skins or anything. I'm just going to cut them. We're going to discard the greens or move them over for now and wash our beets with a little scrub brush. And that's it. I mean, it's really pretty simple in terms of how to prep, which is why I love them so much too. Okay, so we've got our beets washed, each end cut, and we've cut each piece into a uniform size. So now everything is ready to be oiled and salted and put into our cast Dutch oven. So it's enamel lined cast Dutch oven. And this is my solution to not using foil. So this helps keep the heat in. And then you can always remove the top at the end. So what I like to do with root vegetables is cook them in a cold oven in the middle rack of the oven. And you start them off cold so that they have time to like convert that starch to a sugar, because once the food gets too high, it ends up being harder for them to convert their starch to sugar. And have you ever had like, I mean, I've absolutely cooked like rushed sweet potatoes or some like root vegetable in the oven, and they end up being like foamy almost. Like they've lost their density, they've lost their sweetness and their tasty chew that you're hoping for. They're just not good. So this isn't a rushed recipe. You'll put these in the closed Dutch oven for, 30, 35 minutes. And then if you want to remove the top and get like a little bit of browning for the last 10 or 15 minutes, you can. I actually typically don't, but I like to remove them for certain applications. I mean, I like beets any way they are. So, but leaving the top on works perfectly, and they'll just be a little bit more moist, I would say. And then pulling the top off will make them more like a roasted vegetable that you think of, because roasting, all it is cooking something in a pan in the oven. So this will take in total 45-ish minutes, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the size of beets that you have and whether you decide to remove the top of your Dutch oven or not. So let's get going, and we're going to oil these up and salt them and just toss them in the oven. It's that simple. And one thing you should remember is when you do eat beets, your urine and your bowels might be a little bit red. So don't be alarmed, remember that. I think this more often happens when my children eat beets, particularly when my kids are in diapers and they end up eating beets, and then I forget, and I am a little bit nervous about the fact that their urine is a little bit pink. So remember that. Anyway, so here I've oiled them. It's that simple. And then I'm just gonna go over here, wash my hands, we'll salt them, and we'll throw them in the oven. Okay, so now we have them oiled, layered, even one layer in the bottom of the pan, and I'm just going to generously salt them, and then we'll throw them in the oven. Now, the reason probably why you're looking for a recipe without using foil, you're aware of the fact that there are some concerns with the use of foil. You know, if you were to eat food that's covered in foil every day, I would be more concerned. But studies do show that especially acidic foods or highly seasoned foods do tend to leach more of the aluminum from foil than other foods, but they all, to some degree, leach a little bit of aluminum. And really the concern is not as much as like a one dose, but it's the compounding dose effect, which is true for a lot of things when it comes to nutrition. So since you know about it and you know that there might be some risk, you may as well try to avoid it, right? So this is going to be our solution. We're going to use a cast iron in the oven, and not only does it keep you from having any aluminum concerns, but it's also not so wasteful. I hate the fact that like you use like 2 or 3 feet of foil to roll these individual potatoes. So not only is it time, it's money, and it's wasteful. So this is like a win-win-win, and these are delicious. So here we are, tossing this in the oven. Turn my lights on so that I don't forget what's in the oven. And I'm gonna start them off. I always cook things, like say it calls for like 30 minutes a recipe. I always like down it, you know, 5 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever it might be, depending on the food that I'm cooking. That way I know for sure that I don't overdo it, because recipes tend to vary. You know, you have different equipment. You sometimes have varying sizes of food. In this case, that is a particular concern. And then different ingredients sometimes. I mean, so we're always improvising. So make sure that you check the timer, maybe start it at 25 minutes or so. Expect it to be a little bit longer, but that way you're prepared rather than having burnt food. Okay, so our beets are finished. Look at those puppies. Oh my gosh. Those are good.